from wherever you have joined us. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from Digital Agenda Forum, a forum focused on ensuring that technology meets the common good, that with all its advantages, it should respect the free will God gave to humans. Therefore, human rights and ethics are key in our insights on these developments that are rapidly taking place in the digital tech landscape. I am Lillian Agaba Nabwebale, an information scientist, and together with Claire Babidie, a data scientist, we will be moderating tonight's session. The Digital Agenda Forum has held insightful spaces, discussions focused on digital IDs, sparking engaging dialogues on the promises, challenges, and implications of this emerging technology. We have held an expert discussion about digital IDs, asking whether they are for convenience or control. And we explored the balance between the convenience digital IDs offer and concerns about potential control over individuals. We've had another discussion where we asked digital IDs, can they live up to their promise? We delved into the real-world effectiveness of digital IDs and whether they can truly meet the expectations set for them. And we've also had another on digital IDs. Who is really in control? Here we are examining the underlying power dynamics of digital ID systems, who controls the data, and who stands to benefit or lose. So a case of personal data protection laws and implementation is what we were questioning. Who is pushing these digital ID systems, especially a centralized digital ID system that our governments are trying to implement? So building on these conversations, we will further explore the next frontier of digital transformation, digital IDs in this era of artificial intelligence, digital dependence, how much is too much? With AI rapidly rising in prominence and the growing push for digital IDs, there seems to be a risk in merging these two systems. As digital dependence deepens, crucial questions arise about the extent of our reliance on these technologies. With AI continuing to play an expanding role in digital governance, how much dependence is acceptable before it veers into potential overreach? In implementing digital IDs in this era of AI, and our governments handing over control of our identities to an artificial system? So we will delve right in, and I'll ask Claire to say hello to our audience and also introduce our panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lillian, for introducing the discussion to the audience. I hope I'm being heard. And I'll send greetings to everyone who has joined us. So I'll go right into introducing the panel, though I can see that some of the panelists are listeners. So we've been sending requests to speak. Admins, in case you're able to accept the requests, I think you should be able to see it on your interface, as well as Dr. Kahira. Kindly go ahead to do so. So let me go right into introducing the panel for today's discussion. So today we've been joined by Mr. Bruno Sekiwere. He is a data scientist and he has had a dual career in academia and in industry. He has over 7 years of teaching experience in computer science, and he co-founded the Deep Learning Indaba X Uganda, which is a non-profit organization whose core mission is to strengthen machine learning, specifically in Uganda. He is driven by a vision to build an AI community in Uganda and Africa as a whole, whereby AI is efficiently and effectively positioned to solve society problems. He's also an executive board member of Deep Learning Indaba, a charity organization with a core mission of strengthening machine learning on the African continent. Mr. Bruno Sekiwere, can you hear me? Please go ahead and unmute and say hello to us.
Thanks, Claire, for the introduction, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Express. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much. We also have Prophet Agnes Aram, and she is a pastor at Great Commission Fountain Church and Bob Wino Ministries. Thank you very much, Prophet Agnes, for joining us. I can see you still listening in as you are joined in as a listener, which means you cannot speak. So probably if you could make that transition. We also joined by Dr. Albert Kahira, who is a computer engineer and researcher. He is the founder of DataWise Africa, a data analytics consultancy company, which focuses on AI data and also specializes in AI consultation, data-centric growth strategies, and business automation. He is also an associate principal AI engineer at AstraZeneca R&D, where he works closely with domain scientists to build and scale AI workflows for the pharmaceutical domain. Previously, he was a research scientist at Jülich Supercomputing Center in Germany, and he also holds a PhD, which he did in Barcelona at Polytechnic University of Catalonia. Thank you very much, Dr. Albert, for joining us. So still on my interface. Okay, yes, Dr. Kahira, kindly unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much, Claire, for having us on this space. Thank you very much. Looking forward to an engaging discussion.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. We are also joined by Advocate Quincy Otieno. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. He is an advocate working as an in-house counsel at Parliament Service Commission of Kenya, a mediator and an arbitrator. He is an ADR practitioner with Dispute Resolution Hub, AI policy executive with Sharia Online, a certified AI governance professional. He specializes in technology law compliance, and he's part of the Data Privacy and Governance Society of Kenya. Advocate Quincy, a quick look through. Okay, I hope we will be able to get you online very soon. Thank you very much once again for joining us. For those who have not yet been able to join us, you can go ahead and welcome them. So I'll hand over to Lillian.
All right. Thank you so much. Claire, help me approve an account for he who, that is Quincy. He has sent in his request to be enabled. We will go right in and start with Bruno. We have heard that Bruno is a data scientist and he co-founded a company that is specializing in artificial intelligence and deep machine learning. So we ask, what exactly is AI? What does it do? How far can it go? And after understanding it, Bruno, help us understand if there are any ethical, social, or private risks that can arise from this artificial intelligence thing we are hearing. Because we knew human intelligence, now we are hearing artificial intelligence. Isn't it a risk to digitize human identities in this era of that thing called artificial intelligence that is growing rapidly? Over to you, Bruno.
Thank you, Lillian. And so I'll begin with what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? So in simple terms, in the simplest of English, AI is a field of computer science which basically focuses majorly on creating systems or machines that are capable of performing tasks, which tasks would typically require human intelligence or intelligence. You're trying to make machines think or act like humans. So basically, that's what artificial intelligence is all about. So what I think the other part of the question was, what does it do? What does AI do? So AI is used in quite a number of fields or areas, but its major functions or major where AI is being used is, for instance, in automating repetitive tasks. So in other words, let's say you have a manufacturing company and there are tasks that are done on a daily or that are repetitively done on a daily basis. So you would use artificial intelligence to kind of try to automate those repetitive tasks. So AI can help with that. For instance, the chatbots do quite a lot of that. For instance, there are quite a number of Q&As that maybe your clients would also want to get a hold of. So instead of having someone sitting behind the phone, you just automate those and create a chatbot. Secondly, we also have AI being used in processing data. So using AI, you can analyze quite a vast amounts of data as quickly as possible. This helps you to identify patterns and also kind of look out for insights in your data that humans would ideally miss. AI also can help enhance on decision making. Yeah, for instance, we've heard of online, let's say, online shops or online marketing, online something of the kind. So artificial intelligence can aid in decision making because it helps in offering recommendations based on the data that is being processed by the different. So you let's say you go on Google, you search so many things. So in other words, behind Google there's a recommender system that can actually even recommend to you possible things based on your search history. Or you go to an online shop, you kind of buy things here and there. So the next time you open that site, you can have an AI system running at the background, kind of recommending to you some of the things you can buy because somehow it has studied your shopping patterns. Also, AI helps us to, in other words, interact. It helps those machines interact with humans and so on. So, for instance, NLP. So you have natural language processing, whereby you can have an AI system behind kind of interpreting through text or through live voice. I can say something and someone in English and someone maybe in Uganda or in Swahili can be able to understand through those interactions that are enabled by AI systems. So we have also heard of ChatGPT. So artificial intelligence also enables creation of text. So you can generate content. Just type something and then AI can generate for you context or content that you're looking at. I think that was the third part. How far can we go? So to understand how far AI can go, we have to look at what are the capabilities of AI currently, and also maybe understand what is being looked at as the future of artificial intelligence. So currently we have majorly two types of artificial intelligence, or possibilities of AI. We have what someone might call narrow artificial intelligence. So these are systems which are specific or which deal in specific tasks but lack general understanding. For instance, I might have an image that I would want. So I have an image recognition system, a language translation. So that is narrow artificial intelligence. So it's specific, it's directed towards a specific task, but lacks general understanding of the tasks that it's working on. Then you have generative AI, which like ChatGPT. So this one can create something like human-like content, but it's limited to the data that has been trained on. So potential for right now, that literally that's really the two categories whereby what the AI we have, where it kind of falls. It's either under generative AI or narrow AI. So what does the future how do you see AI in the future? What is being discussed, or what are people looking at in terms of AI in the future? I've had talks of people looking at general AI. This is more hypothetical AI. But I think what people are looking at is making artificial intelligence perform some intellectual tasks that humans can do. In other words, we would require these AI systems to reason like literally how humans would reason. So that is more of a general AI perspective where people are looking at, and the super intelligent AI. So this is where I don't know whether it will happen. Maybe Dr. Albert will help us on this. That's where we can have AI that surpasses human capabilities. I know that is something that it's being looked at. That the AI people with in regards to AI. But that's a discussion for another time, whether really we can have an AI system that surpasses human, and that's like what humans can do. Yeah, so that's I think a discussion that is still ongoing. And so you can apply artificial intelligence in quite a number of fields, in health, in agriculture, in transportation. So literally AI, in my view, can solve so many issues affecting society, ranging from health, let's say in real-time diagnosis without needing, let's say, a doctor. Let's say in agriculture, can you kind of predict, let's say, what your crops will, or what pests and diseases will affect your crops before you even proceed on the actual planting. So AI can be used in quite a number of things. Dr. Leon, there's another question. I think I had the second question. Maybe just
Yeah, so
to
from
remind me.
what you've explained, we are wondering, aren't there ethical, social, and privacy risks? Because you've talked about hypothetical AI and super intelligent AI. Of course, we don't know if the future will take us there, but I believe it can, because there are so many things we dreamt of and we heard of and we thought they are far-fetched, but now we are seeing them. So I believe there is possibility that even super intelligent AI will be here. So we are asking, are there ethical, social, and privacy risks that can arise from digitizing human identities now with this advancement of AI?
All right. Yeah, definitely. There are quite. I would say that digitizing human identities, definitely in the era of advanced AI, brings about quite a number of issues, ethical issues. The major one being the loss of autonomy. So, in other words, for instance, I gave an example earlier on of online shopping systems and so on and so forth, which are backed up by AI. So now these systems, if they can be able to predict your behavior, and preferences, then they can easily manipulate your decisions, either through targeted advertising or targeted recommendations of things to buy, which would literally undermine a person's ability to make decisions for themselves. Like, so in other words, the systems will take away that autonomy from you. Then there's also bias and discrimination, because these AI systems depend on data, and so most of them are first trained on data. So if that data is biased, this biased data can amplify on serious societal inequalities, which may lead to some people being unfairly treated. I heard of a story in the US where they had implemented a recognition system, a facial recognition system, and so it was being employed in a certain state in the US, and it was being used by law enforcement. So what this system used to do, that if it was predicting a face of a person who is black, it was biased in terms of color, let me simply put it. So it would kind of predict blacks as rapists, as thieves, as murderers, and then it would predict all the good things to people with the white color. So that's an issue that arises with AI systems that are trained on biased data. So there will also be a level of exploitation of digital identities, because I think we all know that currently there is what we call deepfakes. We've seen videos and whereby someone can generate a video in your voice when it's literally not you, or someone can literally come up with a digital identity of someone else and of yourself, but when it's not the person that is when it's not you going to use it or using it. So that's the level of where these AI systems can literally injure people in terms of exploiting of digital identities. So that was simply those are the ethical risks. I think they also have social. So AI needs some level of trust. So if we cannot literally, for instance, you look at ChatGPT. People sit for let's say you have a coursework to do, and then you go on ChatGPT, you just type in a sentence, and that ChatGPT will kind of generate for you all the content you need to submit your research or your coursework. So what trust would the lecturer have? Because I think that's something we are seeing. So you talk to lecturers, and I think with ChatGPT, and so now we are looking at how do we now with this emergence of ChatGPT and everything. Now, how sure are we that what the students are submitting is their real work, or it's something that has been generated by ChatGPT? So most of these AI systems will create some element of erosion of trust in society, and in such a way that can also lead to fostering misinformation and skepticism. There's also an element of social inequality. For instance, let's say the government of Uganda implements a digital ID system. We all know that not everyone can easily, or let's say the implementation of that technology may not trickle down to everyone in Uganda. So you may find that if you tag certain services to digital ID systems, then some people will be excluded from receiving some of those services by virtue of them either in the location they are at or their financial standing, or maybe they not They are not able to possess the necessary gadgets required, or they can't actually, if something needs internet, they don't even have the money to buy data and so on. So these AI systems will bring about some element of social inequality. And then the biggest of it all is surveillance and control. And if we look at, let's say, the governments that are pushing for digitization of IDs of their citizens, they may not mention it, but the pushing factor behind it is to surveil and control their citizens. Now imagine a scenario whereby all our IDs are digitized and the government kind of can even tell where exactly you are, or can tell everything that concerns you. Then there will be that element of, they will surveil you. It will be easier to be surveilled, and it will be easier to be controlled. We've seen this in certain countries. I'll just give an example of China, because this is literally where it all leads. Yeah, surveillance and control. So those are some of the social risks that might arise that will arise. It's not made, but it's a given. They must arise. Then we have privacy risks. We all know that even in the current standing of the IT world, we've had issues with data misuse and data breaches. We all know that even in the current a centralized system, whereby now you have all people's digital ID centralized in one location. Data misuse and data breaches is very a centralized system. Will happen. Now you have will happen. So that is digital ID centralized in one location. Needs to be data misuse and data breaches. Then they'll take away your consent as an individual. The question would be, will happen. Will happen. Who does the data that is being collected belong to? Does it belong to the individuals, the owners of the data, as an individual? Or the question would be, belongs to the organization that is. Who does the data that is being collected? So I think our lawyer friends, those are the questions they will individuals, the owners of to answer. Or if government belongs to the organization, that is digitization of our IDs. So I think our lawyer friends, those are the questions they seek our consent to answer before they use our data. If government takes by the mere fact the digitization of our IDs, if we give them our data, whether we surrender it willfully or they seek our consent forcefully, before they use our data, who will be the owner of that data? Or by the mere fact, what are the terms of usage? If we give them our data, whether digital surrender data willfully or the digital data that we provide, who will be the owner of that data? And what are the terms? There's also a risk of profiling, those predictive analysis. I think the digital data that we've seen this being used in so many there's also systems out there in those developed countries where they will say that, and I think through, let's say, facial recognition or computer vision, so many can be able to predict and analyze in those developed countries where they will say that behavior through, let's say, facial recognition or computer vision. So it will bring about a lot of analyze of individuals, basically just because we handed over autonomy over our it will bring about a lot of there will also be elements of basically just because so you have AI which can be able to over quite a number of things. Essays, can also be people's elements of voices abuse. Can even use AI to damage which can be able to get also erode privacy. Can mimic people's actions, voices. Some of us like being anonymous. Can even use AI to damage we do so with digital IDs. Privacy. You may not have that element of anonymity. Some of us like being anonymous in most of the things we do. So with digital IDs, you're engaged in. You may not have that element of anonymity recognized. Some of the things that facial recognition. Our anonymity will also be can easily be with this organized digitization of using facial recognition. So our anonymity will also be at risk with this digitization of
regarding to ethical risks, social and
back to you. I think based on
IDs.
I think that's it.
Wow, that is really detailed but scaring at the same time. Hey, thank you so much, Bruno. Claire, over to you. Wow, that is but really I am scared, detailed but scaring at the same time.
Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you so much,
Bruno. So I'll bring in Dr. Albert.
Over
Dr.
to you.
Albert, I hope you can
but
still hear
scared,
us.
Really.
Yes, I can still hear you.
Thank you. I know you have ventured in the use of AI, so I'll bring in healthcare. Dr. Albert, and from what we are seeing, AI-powered systems and digital IDs are increasingly being integrated into healthcare, from patient identification, medical record management, personalized treatments, and the like. So my first question to you is this good? And if you think it's good, how about the associated risks? I know some of them have been pointed out, so my first question like the data security breaches, the ethical concerns over AI decision making. Think it's good in healthcare. The associated aren't there challenges of entrusting this sensitive health information to these systems that are driven by AI decision making? Aren't there scenarios where we've seen that these systems have actually failed or even done some form of misinformation? Systems that are driven so probably as you come in, maybe help us bridge that these technical and society aspects. Done some form of misinformation.
Okay.
So probably as you come in, maybe help us bridge
sort of background
these technical
very
and
detailed
society
information
aspects.
on what AI is, where we are at the moment with AI, thank you very much. And a very interesting background. So thank you very much to that, Bruno. However, I feel like very detailed information, worried and scared. I'm a huge advocate of technology, and I tend to be on the other side of the argument that technology is indeed a good thing, and we all live the benefits of technology today. We are having this conversation on Twitter, which I refuse to call it X, by the way, which is a technology platform. We all live the benefits so many technology that have made our lives we are having this conversation easy and interesting because of technology, by the way. So, which is a technology platform, the issues raised, the society concerns, privacy and all that kind of thing. But I tend to feel like our society tends to give more weight to these things than there is actually. Because let's go, privacy and all that kind of thing, even before I come to AI but I tend to feel healthcare and all that. Let's start with basic digital IDs, right? To be honest, the current because let's go IDs is actually way more dangerous than digital IDs, right? I don't know. Those of you who are from Kenya, digital ID, and I think it's more or less the same in other East African countries. We have numerous cases of IDs, right? Duplication of IDs, right? I don't know, same person having. Those of you who are from Kenya, you find like 5 people having the same ID in other East African countries, and we all know what this happens when elections come. Numerous all these issues, duplication of IDs, right? We have so many cases of fraud. You find like 5 people as it is right now, and for we all know what this happens slowly elections shifting from traditional systems to digital systems. In Kenya, we have M-Pesa, banking, mobile banking, and all these kind of things. For countries that and bearing in mind that there's a significant population that is quite old and not very versed. Very versed with technology. For example, my mom is in her 70s and she needs to use M-Pesa to send the money and whatever. And this kind of people have been quite old and not conmen and people who want to do bad things and rip them off. And she needs to use M-Pesa to send the money, right? With the current systems that we have. So I tend to be on the other side of people who want to do bad things and rip them off. Digital IDs offer us probably a better sort of way to look into the future. They're going to address some of the major issues we have in current digital IDs, and for countries probably a better like Kenya way that have serious issues of accountability. I see technology as a tool that we can use to solve some of these things. And one of those very, very simple issues is, for example, identifying who is who, right? If you go to the lands ministry today in Kenya, they're trying to digitize the whole lands ministry to solve some of these things. One hell of a task. What used to happen was you used to have one title, for example, that is assigned to like 10 different people, right? And then you would have all these cases in court that never end. Trying to digitize the whole lands ministry, but it has been just because of this kind of things. And so there's a risk to have one title that is assigned to like 10 different people. I see that problem, and then you would have a problem that can easily solved by technology, right? We have cases of government, and so there's a risk withdrawing money from the treasury accounts that is a problem that with no zero accountability and that kind of thing. Again, this is we have cases of digital IDs, and not just digital, but the whole concept of drawing money, digital platforms, treasury accounts. With so as much as I see zero accountability and that kind of thing, again, and people raising all these concerns about privacy, I mean, not just digital, but the same digital platforms can sort of solve. Digital systems are actually worse in traditional systems, right? And people have your ID concerns about privacy, and your picture and whatever. But if you go to the local ministry, somebody has all digital systems are actually in a form, in a paper, and I think that's way more risky. You have your ID written, your number, and so that being said, whatever. But if you go to the, let me talk a little bit about AI. Somebody has all that healthcare like requested. I happen to work in a domain that is, if you ask me. AI in healthcare and trying to address some of the world's biggest challenges in healthcare. And again, for a continent that is significantly and severely underfunded and underdeveloped, especially in terms of healthcare, and we have another huge opportunity here, right? To leverage significantly and severely underfunded. A simple example is you can use a computer vision model to diagnose. Computer vision here, I mean, maybe I should explain a little bit more. By computer vision here, I mean, you can use models that mimic how we diagnose, right? Computer vision but because it's AI, obviously it can see way better and perform way better than the human eye. And so models that mimic how we see that is significantly underfunded and like in a remote area, if they have this, if you can put these tools at their disposal, we're going to really help these kind of people, right? Take an example of significantly underfunded, which is one of the remote area. If they have, I don't want to say easiest, that's probably not the correct word, but like one of the, we're going to really help these kind of people, right? Has a good entrance for AI is if you break your leg, in a village, and the doctor is not sure if they do an X-ray or whatever, and they're not sure what's happening with your leg. And if there's no radiologist around, right, if you break your leg, I mean, obviously in a village, a general practitioner can do this. But remember, in some of our towns, and they're not sure what's happening, we don't even have general practitioners at our disposal. We have something we call clinical officers, who are not exactly trained to the same level as general practitioners can do this. But remember, doctors, and even general doctors are not trained. We don't even have specialists. Can we bring that specialist knowledge through AI? Can we empower the general practitioner with that kind of doctors? And even general, and what kind of decisions can they make given that? Can we bring that specialist knowledge through AI? And that's when can we empower that? You see a huge benefit. That kind of right. Imagine a nurse. What kind of decisions can they make? Has to do right. An emergency or like an important procedure on a patient, but they don't have the tools necessary. Imagine one, because some of these machines are extremely expensive, and two, because specialists are simply not available. An emergency or like an important how can a patient, but they don't have these accessibility there. One, and we see that's very some of these machines are extremely expensive. We are talking about Africa has one of the highest cases of late diagnosis, right? Because the thing about AI, what people need to understand about AI, and we see the way we see AI working, it's not a standalone system. It's a healthcare system, right? If we can help someone detect cancer because at a very early stage, people need to understand about AI. We don't need to know with finality that this is cancer or not. But if we can see, we can have a system that kind of tells us, like, if we can help someone, this one requires you to see another doctor, right? That's important. This kind of people can be able to get access and probably if we can see earlier earlier diagnosis, this one all this kind of things. That's extremely important for our population. Right? That's important. Remember, we have one of the highest late diagnosis problems in Africa, right? Kidney diseases and all this kind of things. These are problems that can be easily diagnosed with AI. Remember, we have one of it's easier if you can empower your local doctor, kidney diseases, to be able to do these kind of things, and we can embed that into existing machines, right? It's easier if we can empower your local doctor think that to be able to do this, the benefits and we can embed that posed by the systems are quite important. That can even be more, and we cannot ignore that for fear of that other things like privacy. And I'm not saying those things are important. There are researchers who have dedicated their entire lives to studying those issues. But I also feel like for those issues are engineering problems, and I'm not saying those things are not important. One of researchers who have dedicated their entire I'm a trained engineer studying, and I love engineering because the beauty of engineering is you're a problem solver, right? So let's try these systems out. Let's see what problems they bring up. Let's fix them. And let's reap the benefit of the beauty of engineering of these systems, right? Engineering throughout human history has been one of those things that has significantly improved the lives of people, right? We've been able to build canals, we've been able to divert rivers of this to go back to provide engineering throughout that had never had no access to water, that has significantly improved the lives of people, right? We've been able to build canals, and I see that as a tool we can continue using to build the systems. The other final thing I want to say is, with AI and medical diagnosis engineering, and I see of healthcare that we're constantly as a tool facing using new diseases and new challenges that take forever to find the drugs. Medical diagnosis traditionally it takes almost like 10 years to facing from research to putting a drug in the market and new challenges that take forever. And if we can use AI to find during this period of time from 10 years to 2 years, that's a huge benefit. I mean, look at what we did to COVID, right? We were able to get a COVID vaccine out in almost 2 years. That's unheard of in human history. Now, I don't want to say that's only AI that was 2 years, but AI played. I mean, look at what we did to COVID, right? And we can go into details of how it played a huge role in that. But we can all unheard of agree that now COVID is now behind us, largely because of very powerful computing capacities in data science, and we can go into the details of how it played a huge role in that. And so this is important. We can all. So when we think about all these technologies and what they do and how they're important for us in data science, I think it's important to talk about the benefits. Right? And so it's important to talk about benefits and what they bring to the society. Technologies and how the final thing for us is when we think when we look at this problem, right? It's important to talk about benefits and what they bring to the society. Can you hear me? And
yes,
the final thing I want to say is when we look at this problem only from a fear perspective, you fail to tap into the economic benefit that comes with this kind of technologies, right? Look at how much money is being made out there with AI. Right? Companies are making millions of dollars. You fail to tap into by developing these models and putting them out there, and these models are helping people. Right now, look at how much a subscription costs $20 an hour with AI. Right? Companies we can decide we're not going to do this and look at it from a negative, by developing these models and putting them out there, which I think is important. Right now, ethical issues that we should consider. But I'm also saying is we have to be involved we can decide we're not going to do these technologies so that we can also get the economic benefit of these technologies, right? I think the world right now we should consider, economic world, but I'm also saying going to be built around mining and all this kind of thing of these technologies, so that we can also get the economic benefit of minerals we have in the world are very limited. Because if you look at the amount of money we make from mineral versus the amount of money we make from technology, mining and all this kind of thing, we have the value proposition of I am almost 100% sure that the value proposition of the amount of money we make from mineral and the economic impact it has had on that particular economy, the value is way higher than all the minerals Kenya has. 100% sure that the value proposition. So let's think about that for a moment and see how we can leverage this impact it has had on that particular economy is way higher than. I'm sorry, Bruno, I'm on the other side of the argument, but I do feel like let's think about that for a moment. It's quite important to look at this from that side angle, but I also do agree with you a lot in terms of the ethics and the issues you raised. I'm sorry, Bruno, those are important issues. On the other side of the argument. Thank you. I do feel like it's quite important to look at this from that side angle, but I also do agree with you a lot.
Quincy, can you hear me?
And the issues you raised, and those are important.
Yes, I can hear you. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. You can come in. So, from the legal law and policy background, and in this era of AI, digital IDs being portrayed as a developmental necessity, tagging it all to all the different aspects of services. Do you think AI has limitations, or can it be fully trusted in personal and society decision-making to protect human freedoms and control. What is AI's influence according to you, and its potential overreach?
Thank you. I hadn't gone through the questions in detail. So, as always, AI has limitations, which is a form of inherent bias. One thing to note when it comes to policy legislation right now in Africa, we still don't have any concrete ones. It is, I believe, out of 54 states in the continent, we only have 4 countries which have got an AI strategy, which is heavily linked to data protection legislation. So in that context, I ordinarily like to frame AI as a form of automated decision making to fit within the profiling connotations of data protection legislation. And it's covered in majority of legislative texts around data protection. So we can't fully trust AI currently. There's still too much in terms of gray areas and in terms of processing that we would not see on a day-to-day basis. So giving it full trust doesn't make sense because at the end of the day, if you look at the history of machine learning and big data, you will realize that a lot of issues arose were out of processing in totality, because up to what function or up to what level of execution do we as humans see how AI is processing? Because the whole premise or the whole definition of AI is devoid of human intervention, meaning as humans we do not get involved within the processing stages of AI. So I tend to look at the concept of human in the loop and human on the loop, meaning human in the loop, meaning at different developmental stages, we can only keep or maintain an eye on the said system, and we have to continuously monitor the systems and how they are executing the next functions or they are executing the orders or prompts given. And I usually like to relate this to a form of impact assessment that, at each and every stage of development and during the incubation testing phase of AI systems, do we really have that transparency requirement where we can see how it executes, how it rationalizes, and how it thinks? So that is now in inherent biases. So bias is ordinarily on, especially in this instance, on the data. So if there are already biases existing within the data that is used to train a particular model, what AI systems will do is just continue to amplify such biases to the extent where it becomes the primary basis of that AI system. Hence, we will create what we commonly refer to as hallucinated inferred data. And this data ordinarily, if you further and continue to use it to train AI systems, it will lead to what we know as a model collapse, meaning the AI system will further have less and less inaccurate information that will not be trusted by the end user. So secondly, we have lack of an understanding, where most AI systems are very objective. The code or the algorithm which ordinarily runs the systems will have an objective. So I am not a data scientist, neither am I an AI engineer. But a good friend of mine called Wansla Souma explained it to me that at different stages of coding, you give it a specific set of algorithmic instructions through mathematical equations, and as you have learned, it will execute according to or alluding to that particular perspective, which is not exactly accurate 9 times out of 10. And you can see the case of the Compass AI system, which is used in the human resource management systems in the US. It has a very good and very grim story. So AI is mostly objective. An example is in Kenya, we had a case where a lady was given a custodial sentence after it was found that she indeed murdered her husband, but she was the one who was aggrieved. So the court's discretion was to give her a custodial sentence in order for her to just serve a day and go back to her home, because subject to the grievance or to the offense that she committed, the intervening circumstances or the surrounding circumstances before the sentencing proved vital to executing, rendering like the judgment. If you give an AI system a similar case, similar facts, it will think objectively and will give that lady the maximum possible penalty or sentence because it does not subjectively think. Then this also leads to the whole aspect of moral agencies, where AI will lack that moral reasoning, make it unsuitable for decisions involving human rights, individual freedoms, and ethical considerations. A proactive measure would be human oversight. Like I said, human in the loop, human on the loop. It's very important, meaning before development, there has to be human intervention through impact assessments. For the Data Protection Act, there's a DPIA. So you conduct a DPIA on the data that's collected to train such model, and also you can equally do a DPIA on the inferred data which comes out of the other end if it is either biased or either it paints a negative connotation. We could also use ethical guidelines, and in this case, I would ordinarily say OECD is a good platform to begin with. So OECD principles on ethical development of artificial intelligence is a good place to start. Then you can do transparent AI accountability mechanisms, and then make sure AI remains a tool. I know most people think AI will replace our jobs or will do this, but it's just meant to complement. I was teaching some professors a couple of weeks back, and I posed the question: is it about time we evolved the Bloom taxonomic triangle of learning to go from, our old system of cramming and regurgitating all information and forgetting to actually giving problem-based questions and solutions? Because according to me, AI is meant to shorten the feedback loop for learning. Meaning, if I want to study for my exams and I have question papers, I can copy paste the questions onto an AI system and it will probably give me correct answers, because the mode of setting all those exam questions is based off of the lower tier of the Bloom taxonomic triangle, which is what we're used to. Then two, on digital ID and societal alternatives. I'm sorry, Claire, I've jumped to the next question. It just hit me. How do I say this? Oh, sorry, on limitations. China has a social credit system. I'm just giving more examples so that to paint an image. There's a social credit system that ordinarily amplifies or rather shows the systemic risk of using AI for mass surveillance, and it lacks the principalities which are ordinarily used to build society systems in the OECD. Canada's, I remember it was a privacy commissioner versus an AI system, and it emphasized the need for an algorithmic transparency. And part of it formed part of my thesis that I was writing on algorithmic impact assessments, meaning to what extent will we be able to foresee, control, and, regulate AI development within the African context. Then we have issues such as facial recognition. I know the healthcare screening has been extensively talked about. I won't even add anything on it. I think it's absolutely wonderful what they're doing. I've seen what they're doing with protein folding when it comes to studying of cures to cancer or possible cures for cancer. And it's absolutely amazing. To this extent, I believe the latest research indications were that they were able to get a protein sequence that would be able to further the cause into getting an overall genomic sequence to cure cancer in individuals. Then financial credit scoring systems also an issue, which I've seen. Egypt has one. Egypt has one of the best. However, when it comes to bias of these social credit scoring systems, I remember in Estonia there was an issue where they were discriminating against a certain community that would seek would seek the services of said AI systems when it comes to, credit scoring. And majority of banks are using it under the like low key. Like I know Equity Bank has an AI credit scoring system, and it will rank you according to maybe the deposits or according to maybe the frequency of transactions that you undertake in said systems, and then it can give you further credit facilities depending on your usage. That would be like my full answer to this. If you want to look at human impact and freedoms, whenever you prompt an AI system, the inferred data is ordinarily has a form of bias that most people are not aware about. Always test and always verify said inferred data if you're using it for academic purposes or if you're using it for research purposes, because at the end of the day these are still human-made systems, and AI is really good at doing activities constantly which would be tiresome to the ordinary individual. So is it a threat? I don't think so. I think it's just a tool. There was a lot of fear mongering around AI, taking over the world, and the most I've seen is AI making the Pope seem like he's a rapper at this moment. So according to me, no. Second question was digital IDs portrayed as development in necessity of tagging all aspects of services. Can society thrive without implementing digital IDs as a technology? I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's mandatory to have digital IDs in developing alternative systems. There are so many other technologies that are out there that could be used. So one thing that I love about blockchain is the whole aspect of decentralized identity solutions, which would be based off sovereign identity frameworks that would give individuals control over their personal data. If you're aware of any blockchain system or any blockchain basics, you would get to understand that for every blockchain system that you're part of, you're given something called a hash key, which is essentially your credit card to accessing said facilities or institutions within that blockchain. So if data is, as you said, hallucinated inferred data, then ordinarily you would have a difficult time you'd have an easier time to amend it because it would be open and transparent to anybody who has access to that blockchain. If you attempt to change said information, then it would inform everybody who has privy access to that particular blockchain. Hence a form of decentralized identity. Like it won't give you like your name per se, but it will give you a randomized sequential number that will be used to identify you that will match to the hash key. Secondly, I think we have something called as privacy preserving technologies. So there's something called zero knowledge proof and advanced encryption, which just basically means that it makes sure that verification, like you can verify the data without comprehensive exposure. Meaning, if I was to link it to data privacy legislation, you would look at privacy by design, meaning said system has to be designed specifically to mask or to anonymize or to randomize any information or data that would directly links to a particular data subject, hence according a certain liability to the processor or the controller. In this case, the processor is the AI system. There's always a question in law which you ask, if an AI system perpetuates a harm or bias, who is liable for that harm or bias? Is it the end user? Is it the maker of the system? Or is it the AI system? I feel like that's a question I'll leave to the listeners. Number 3, we have consent-driven authentication, which allows for selective information sharing. The best example of this is when someone on someone on student blogs requests access to certain academic articles or documents, they will have to seek express permission or authority from you as the author to allow them use said sources, and you'll be paid a stipend according to the level of access. So it's like you have to consent to it, because you're already subscribed and your IP is already on that website. And then once you consent, then the information will be shared. However, as I said, it is a bit selective because you have the power to revoke. Meaning, if I was to link it to data protection, this is a form of right of erasure. Meaning, at the end of the day, you have the right to recall, or you have the right to refuse access to said information because it belongs to you, personally identifiable to you, or a form of data governance in this case. To summarize, maybe we could have successful alternatives. Let me say about 5. Strong privacy protections, user consent mechanisms, flexible and inclusive design, exactly. Technological neutrality, which is more difficult to attain compared to said systems, because at the end of the day, algorithms power most AI systems, and a lot of AI systems usually self-replicate or can execute a certain function up to an infinitum possibility, which is not seeable or is not, predictable to the human context. Then robust security frameworks. Cybersecurity laws need to be amended, to be honest. There's a lot of gray areas, especially in terms of ethical design and in terms of bias. In Kenya, we have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission Act, which if you were to link it to our definition of bias and profiling, you'd realize that a form of machine learning bias or a form of algorithmic bias in this case is not adequately covered or adequately defined to be a human rights violation, which in the Kenyan context ought to be. When it comes to security frameworks, Bayesian methods of machine learning ought to be also included in maybe cybersecurity laws. It's just a random idea or thought, but the whole essence is that any form of processing that does not conform to the regulations ought to be frozen or put on ice before it is actually deployed. For that one, I had an example, but it's out of mind. But I hope that's enough at the moment. Thank you, Claire. Back to you.
Thank you, Quincy, for pointing out some of the gaps and probably the alternatives that we can seek out for. So I'll hand over to Lillian.
Thank you so much, Quincy. For me, I'll straight away first go to the panelist we have from the faith side. Our approach is that we also bring in the God perspective when we discuss all these things, because we believe minus that component of God, we might run with only our human abilities and forget that there is a deity to whom we report and belong to. So Agnes, as a pastor, a Bible reader, a minister of the gospel, from what you have heard the rest discuss, are there parallels to be drawn from the scriptures? From the angle of faith, won't digital IDs be granted AI excessive authority, subsequently leading to potential collapse of structures built on overdependence on man-made artificial systems? Help us understand from the God perspective. Must we really keep pushing for digital ID systems? Of course, AI is good, but why would we really add the digital ID? From the Bible perspective, won't we find flaws going against God and our right to decide? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate the discussion. And yes, I'm going to base my discussion on the perspective of faith and spirituality, which I believe is very foundational and very important. From scripture, we learn in Genesis that God created us in his image and likeness, and he has given us his ability to be creative, to be innovative. However, of what God has permitted for us, then we certainly have issues with God. It's okay to be creative. It's okay to be innovative, but God has limits for us. He has a pattern that He expects us to follow. We'll see, for instance, in Genesis 11, when humanity decided that they would build a tower that would reach the heavens, and God was not happy with that and had to disorganize the languages so that man could not proceed with that agenda. So even as we saw IDs, its benefits, like we have had, it's also important to look into the disadvantages and also to know limits. What does God say about all this? What does God want for us? 3 days ago, AI Jesus was launched, to my shock. And so this AI Jesus is expected to speak back to people, listen to their prayer requests, answer their questions. And it is just so, for me, it is really crazy. Because from the word of God, I know Jesus said that they that worship Him will worship Him in spirit and in truth. And we know that God is spirit. So to come up with the creation of an AI Jesus simply is a replacement of God and how God wants us to relate and fellowship with Him. So for me, as a pastor, as a minister, as one that has been entrusted with the spiritual lives of people, this topic is very important, and it's really important for us to be conscious and deliberate on knowing how far we can go with this. For instance, one of the speakers mentioned, and I also was able to read this as I was doing research about this topic, I was able to understand that the levels of AI. I don't want to go into the details, but what gave me lots of questions is the super AI, which from the description that was given is that this super AI is to operate more than a human being or beyond a human being. So the question I ask myself is, that means I as a human being will probably stop being important or significant or useful. And yet I know from the word of God that a human being is the highest of all God's creation. When we read from Psalm chapter 8, scripture says that the Lord made human beings a little lower than angels and crowned them with glory and honor. I'm paraphrasing. So that speaks that there is a certain value and importance that God has attached to human beings. So to have a creation in form of AI or super AI that is going to supersede a human being, I don't know how that will look like or that will sound like. So looking again from the book of Exodus chapter 32, we are seeing man trying to create their own ways or their own systems of convenience, creating a calf that they want to worship because they seem not to be satisfied with the ways of the Lord. And the end result of it wasn't really good for those of you who are Bible scholars. So it's important for us to know the limits, to know how far we should go. In my own personal opinion, for instance, based on what I have heard, if we are talking about digital IDs getting into our bodies, I am honestly not comfortable with that because my body is special. I'm comfortable with having my my ATM in my bag, but not in my body. Looking again, going back to Exodus 32, when the people rebel and choose their own ways that are different or are in opposition to the will of God or to the ways of God, that calls for attention. So we need to be sure that the agenda of AI and digital IDs is not leading us to distraction. We also see from scripture in Revelations chapter 18. All through scripture actually, the Bible talks about the systems of Babylon, the systems of the world, which actually sound good and may be good, but what is the ultimate impact? What is the ultimate result? I have had one of the ideas of the digital IDs or AI itself, when it gets into the human body, there are alterations that happen, or there are alterations in the human system that are expected to happen. So how can we trust and be sure that those alterations will not impact my physical body, my emotional being, and even my spiritual being? Like I mentioned earlier, we've already seen the example of AI Jesus. That speaks to us that AI is expected to impact our spiritual beings as well. No? So to what extent are we going to allow that? Are we going to allow to fellowship with AI in the spiritually, or are we going to, fellowship with God who is spirit in the right way? Like Revelations 18 talks about the fall of Babylon, So we just need to have God's mind on these things, have God's perspective on these things. However much they sound good, what is God saying to us as humanity? In scripture, we read as humans related with God, as humans fellowshipped with God, God communed with them. Sometimes directly through encounters and sometimes through prophets. We have seen in scripture where people have done things or come up with ideas, and God has spoken to them through prophets that, this idea is my will, follow through. But this one is not mine, drop it. And if they refuse to drop it, the consequences were not nice. So again in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7, scripture says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, beginning of knowledge, but the fool despises wisdom and instruction. We appreciate science and all these innovations that are intended to make our lives better, but at the end of it all, our decisions, our moving forward has to be well analyzed and hinged on what does the creator of the universe say? What is the will of God, the Almighty, who created heavens and earth and everything in it? So God has been speaking all through from generation to generation, through his servants, through his prophets. And as the Bible says that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So in the past days, God spoke to his people to guide them, to give them wisdom, to give them knowledge by which they should operate, excel, be preserved, and be cared for. Even in our day and age, we have men and women of God, we have prophets that the Lord has spoken to, that the Lord has called to be a guide and a voice, his voice to his people. I'll give you an example. I was intrigued by one of the astounding prophecies by a man of God, the voice of God to this generation, Prophet Elvis Mbonyi, where he clearly prophesied and said that there will be a shaking, a serious shaking. And he mentioned particularly shakings in the area of technology. Then he went ahead to mention that Silicon Valley Bank would fall, you know. So for me, that speaks to me, and meanwhile, that prophecy came to pass. Silicon Valley Bank actually collapsed. And I know that it's not because God wanted it to collapse or to punish people, but because humanity sometimes goes to the extreme to do things that end up grieving God or diverting from the pattern that God has ordained and purposed for us. So if we are embracing technology, let us embrace it, but let us be conscious that it should not go beyond the appropriate limit. It should not affect our well-being. It should not affect our privacy. It should not affect the way we worship and relate with God according to how He wants to relate with us. So that would be my submission.
Thank you, Agnes. Lillian, did you know about AI Jesus?
No, but I have tried using image generations, and you can tell AI generate for me a Jesus wearing sneakers and a jersey, and it does it. So imagine someone who has never known Jesus. It is very easy for them to think that that is the true Jesus. Over to you, Claire.
Interesting. So we are going to get into a Q&A session to the audience. In case you want to speak, you will request. I think Lillian and I should be able to see that and go ahead to give you the rights to speak. But I have a follow-up question for you, Dr. Albert. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. So I wanted to
I got
find
terminated
out,
before I could finish speaking, but it's okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I noticed. Apologies for that. Technology, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to find out from you, do you think digital IDs are a priority for developing countries? I remember the COVID vaccine. At the time we had mass vaccination, we did not use our IDs. Do you think can't we first build infrastructure, for example, computer factories? Yes. Because as you can see, the developing countries that are already benefiting from AI are not using digital IDs.
So, I mean, those two are unrelated, by the way. Digital IDs and AI are completely unrelated, right?
Yes, that's
Digital
true.
IDs are just a way of trying to identify people better and harmonize services. And we can actually implement, harmonized systems without necessarily using digital IDs, right? For example, the way I have a digital ID, by the way, I live in Spain, I have a digital ID. And the way I use my digital ID is, for example, to pay my taxes, and to identify myself in government, ministries. For example, if I want to log into a particular government ministry, I can do that with my digital ID instead of, manually going there to get something done, right? Let's say I need a certain government service, right? One of the most common government services that we need in Kenya is, for instance, a certificate of good conduct, right? If I need a certificate of good conduct, if I have a digital ID, I can just do that online, right? I don't need to go to a police ministry or a police station to be able to do that. So they simplify that. So they're very, those are two very separate things. This is just a system. But I think where people find a concern, when they talk about, in the AI, in the age of AI and whatever, is what happens to the person who owns or who has all that data about ourselves, right? They have my name. They have probably so. When I used to live, I lived for some time in Turkey, and in Turkey it was not exactly a digital ID, but it was like a very centralized system. So with one ID, I could know which grade I scored in which class and whatnot, right? So that's connected to the Ministry of Education. But also when I went to any particular hospital, all I needed was a unique ID, and the doctor could tell if I've ever been diagnosed with whatever disease and what treatment was I given and all that kind of thing, right? So it's kind of like centralization and centralizing things, and that kind of system. Now, the question is, imagine that, the government is in charge of all this information and they have all this information about you, and, they know which disease you suffer from. They know which grade you got in 2022. And they know which property you own and all that kind of thing, right? With that information, obviously, it's possible to train very, very powerful AI models to do all sorts of things, right? And I don't want to get into the details of what sort of thing they can do. And I think that's why people are having a concern on this, right? But digital IDs in themselves are not necessarily connected to, AI, right? It's just that what can we do with the information, whoever collects that information, what kind of systems can they build now that we have technologies as powerful as AI, right? So yeah, I guess that's the question. Or maybe I didn't understand your question properly.
So that's the question. So our concern is, and not the fact that they are related. So our concern is we are in this era where we're having a lot of advancements in AI. So if we have these centralized systems in place, the digital IDs in place, have we examined the risks that are associated from the very last example that you have given? Whereby at the end of the day, we can have, let's say, some form of control, some form of surveillance that is being introduced. Why? Because we already have the AI systems in place, and it so happens that now we have our information centralized.
Yeah. And by the way, there was another question you had asked before. Let me tackle that. Like, are they a priority for developing countries? Personally, I think yes. I have a serious problem with how we do IDs in Kenya. The government has tried to introduce like IDs that expire, and a lot of people have opposed that. But I personally think it's a good idea. One, because I'm coming from a data perspective, and one of the most important things in data is data integrity. In other words, how can you trust this information that you have, right? Now, imagine we issued someone with an ID when they were 18 years old. That person is now 55 years old. They have never had to renew that ID. It's 100% sure that the information on that ID is no longer relevant, right? Their photos are no longer relevant. Their location is no longer relevant, and whatnot and whatnot. So we don't have a mechanism to update this information and whatnot. So I feel like a lot of developed countries, and maybe not all of them, Kenya in particular has this problem where we just haven't figured out how to do IDs right. And I think that's just laziness to a large extent. But are they relevant to countries? Yes. What I find wrong with digital IDs and how they're being done is the people behind them, right? There's a lot of push from all these global leaders, like you've probably heard about the Tony Blair Institute and blah, blah, blah. All the kind of people like really aggressively pushing this agenda of digital IDs on African countries. And the problem with that is the budget that it comes with, right? Like they're charging us an enormous amount of money to do this kind of things, right? While I personally believe these are solutions that could be developed, locally and whatnot. In Kenya, we had sometimes back the whole Huduma number that was being shoved down our throats, which was an earlier attempt at digital IDs. I think it was one of the most stupid ideas ever implemented by a government that failed miserably. And whatnot, right? Now, coming to the risk of what happens now in the age of AI is a lot of countries have put up their Data Protection Act in place, right? Kenya had that, and one of the reasons I didn't sign up for Huduma number when it was introduced was because we just didn't have a legal framework for this thing, right? There was no, the act or parliament or whatever law that established that was not in place, and the government was saying, no, just collect the data, we will pass the law later. And I was like, yeah, you're collecting the data under which law, right? So, and we don't even know what happened to that data, by the way. So it's important to be careful to do these things when the right laws are in place. Now, if they were to start collecting our information again, probably I would, be a bit more open to it than that time, right? So we need to sort of be careful from that angle. So two things, right? One is the cost that comes with this and who is actually pushing this agenda. Can we do digital IDs out of our own interests, right? Rather than, foreign interests and these kind of things. And two, the cost associated with that is always enormous. One, because we just, hire these external consultants that come and do all these fancy things and whatnot. And finally, it's just ensuring that the right legal framework exists to protect people from, like you said, what if somebody was to take all this data and train the AI model? Imagine in Kenya, we have 56 or 50 million people, right? Having the data of 50 million people properly organized in one place. I mean, there is crazy amount of things you can do with that data, right? And so that data is just too dangerous to be at the control of one person or one institute without, very good frameworks in place. And I would say that's my concern. Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question, or maybe I just made it worse.
No. You did answer the question, and you've actually also highlighted some of the things that we need to pay attention to. That at the end of the day, who is pushing this agenda? Do we even have the right laws in place? And as well as the costs that are associated. Okay, so in case you want to ask a question, kindly go ahead as the panelists prepare to give their key takeaways from today's discussion.
We can read out the comments. Probably they can help us get questions through them. We see Epic Truth says, isn't this AI a precursor to this Bible verse of Revelations 13? It forced all people, small, great, rich and poor, free and slave, to have a mark on their right hand or forehead. Without the mark of the name of the beast or the number of its name, it was impossible to buy or sell anything. I believe that is for Agnes. Then over-reliance on AI may lead to ethical issues such as bias in AI systems, privacy concerns, and unintended consequences that arise when humans don't fully understand the tech behind AI decisions. If individuals and organizations blindly trust AI, it could exacerbate these risks. There is Emmanuel. He says China's social credit system, a lesser entity playing God to a greater one. This nightmare is as bad as it comes. I believe that is still in response to Agnes. Steven says transparency in AI development is still on a all-time low. And he says no to digital ID. He also talks about the China's social credit systems, further reflecting the dangers of AI systems. Ivan says it's not that all technology is important. It's not that all technology is important and should be adopted. I believe he's saying not every technology should be adopted, really. Much as it is good, we shouldn't run with everything. Then another one from Steven says 4 out of 54 states in Africa have AI strategies. So I'll take this back to Quincy. From the policy, legal, regulation, how are we doing in East Africa here? Beyond even Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and the like. And then Africa-wise, how are we doing on AI regulation? Or we've left it to go wherever it wants to go. And whoever can use it and can, make data sets, can do whatever they want. Then there's another one from Inzindoro. He says digital IDs are very important. They can help us maintain some order in our resources and wealth. It is important for us to put the correct infrastructures to support the application of these IDs, so that it takes us back to infrastructure. And that's the question Claire asked. Is our infrastructure ready for digital IDs? For us, for Uganda, I don't know about Kenya, but for Uganda, really, the internet coverage is terrible. Then the digital literacy levels are terrible. The roads are terrible. The health facilities are terrible. So we believe we need to first look at these things before we go into the infrastructure. So I will still give that to Quincy. I know, Quincy, I hope you're taking note. And then I want to finish all these questions at once, one comments. And someone asked, Dr. Albert what Dr. Albert is saying about AI in healthcare is good. But why add digital identity? That is the question. We do not disagree about the benefits of AI. We can still make money from AI without attaching our digital IDs. And then someone says, I think AI is great in simplifying repetitive tasks. However, my concern is the gradual loss of basic skills, e.g. growing so reliant on, say, a calculator that that someone forgets basic math. So what happens when these gadgets are not available? One becomes completely incapacitated. And a comment was added to that it's true. An incapacitated generation, AI is good for taking away the ability to do things ourselves. If combined with digital IDs, trouble has come. There is fire on the mountain. No to digital IDs. Actually, I think, Claire, I don't want to be biased, but I think that the generation that is relying so much on technology has forgotten to think on its own, and do things on their own. The moment technology fails, they also fail because they've never learned to do anything. AI systems can be vulnerable to cyber attacks, someone says, or malfunctions. So over-relying on AI without maintaining adequate human oversight and security measures can create significant risks. Another one says, AI poses several potential challenges and not dangers. In my professional opinion, the challenges are privacy. It goes on to explain all those bias and discrimination, autonomous weapons, economic inequality, existential risk, among others. So from the comments, I believe that our panelists can now know where to come in and what to highlight and what to put straight. But I also saw Stephen's hand up, and Stephen has the right to speak. He has been granted the right. Stephen, you can ask if you have any question or comment.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to approach this from the basic principles of information security, which stands on 3 pillars of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Security by design states that you need to collect the least information possible to execute the mandate that you're required to. With digital IDs, we've seen the data protection regulations extend into areas of biometrics and things like DNA, which by de facto defeats the underlying principles of information security. If you need a digital ID system, why would you need an iris scan, fingerprints, and a DNA sequence of an individual? So I think this is an overstep and something that already goes beyond the privacy of an individual and violates many of the principles of the information security. Now, to put across the question to the panelists, given that now we already have that in context that the underlying principles of information security are violated, how do you think this is going to overwhelm the situation, given the fact that there is possibility of control, surveillance, and limiting freedoms of individuals? Thank you.
Could you mind repeating the last bit of that question? Because I'm trying to internalize it.
So, yes. So the fact that the underlying principles of information security and security by design, which is limiting a principle of least privilege, you need to collect as minimal information as possible to be able to execute your task. So, for instance, in the ID system, all that information collected about you is sufficient to, go ahead and give the different systems ability to do their work. But we have seen an overstep of that, whereby now governments seek to get biometric data, and that's clearly that is fingerprint, iris scans, and the DNA sequence of an individual. So how is this flaw in the design going to exacerbate the situation, given that now when you integrate that with AI systems, it gives you full control of a person's life. So that's the question I'm putting forward. The fact that in recognizing the fact that these digital ID systems have failed to abide by the principles of information security, then how is it going to be, how bad is the situation going to be with the integration of AI?
Okay, that's a mouthful of a question, but let me try to break it down. Legislation is, or like legislative functions, is a preserve of legislatures who are primarily politicians in, I believe, the greater African or worldwide. When it comes to, I believe, the cybersecurity laws or the data protection laws in your country and Kenya, they mirror when it comes to principles or principalities. When it comes to digital identities or digital, like the system, this serialization is what will link you. The aspect of them collecting data that is not necessarily needed, hence the limitation for purpose principle, if I may quote the Kenyan Data Protection Act principles, is for them to only gather what is necessary or crucial. When it comes to AI and digital identities, what will happen is the AI will be able to collect, categorize, sift, and in another perspective, try and profile the subcategories of data which has been fed to it through the digital identity systems or digital identity data, and thereby, according to the person who has full access or granted access to the said system, they might be able to manipulate it to their advantage. Meaning, if they want to isolate, or if they want to do a form of insider trading by pre-ordering a particular type of medication to target a specific illnesses according to the register of, or according to the information collected from a digital identity recognition numbers, they can be able to take advantage of that information. At the end of the day, it is more important to acknowledge that as much as the variables humans can see, AI simply has ad infinitum possibilities and variations of possibilities it can actually calculate and oversee. If you factor in this, the reason why I say it's still dangerous to collect things such as medical data, which is sensitive personal data, is that you can profile and you can create any form of bias or any form of categorization that will eventually lead to massive irregularities, whether it goes to procurement, whether it goes to allocation of national resources, whether it comes to profiling for elections and what. At the end of the day, I tend to think, despite the human necessity for morality in collection and processing of said information within a certain criterion, AI has the same bias set. However, humans have and I think I'll use our divine panelists, like not quotation. I'll use the divine panelists' perspective. Humans have a morality question, meaning we can seek out the better nature of ourselves because we have been there before the AI systems were created. Meaning we can lean towards divinity and lean towards the religion more, which will give us principles enshrined in the commandments, enshrined in the Bible, as compared to AI systems, just a bunch of algorithms, which, according to the person who executes a certain command or a certain prompt, will give them their desired results without limitation if the token system and the parameters set forth are not controlled or are not centralized in this case. Yeah, I'll give it to another panelist.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to say something on this, and it's important. I think in Africa, in Kenya, and in Africa in general, it's quite important we educate our population on what some of these technologies are and what they do and what they mean. I feel like there's a huge gap in understanding what particular technologies are and whatnot. So, for example, like you mentioned, I mean, digital IDs don't involve collecting your DNA sequence at all, right? There's no such thing in the concept of digital IDs. There is no, I mean, what they do is really not different from what your standard ID does, right? You have a unique ID number. In that case, it's it could be a hash number or whatever, right? There's a complicated system of encryption that goes on there. But on top of that, what you have is the basic information that you would have in any other ID, right? You can have biometrics. You already have your biometrics anyway in your ID or in your passport, right? In Kenya now we have electronic passports, which means, you know, it has all your biometrics anyway, right? So that's obvious. It's going to have that. So nothing really changes in terms of the principles of security, like you mentioned, with regards to digital ID. So it's, and I know when these things, like when they were collecting Huduma number in Kenya, for instance, people were quite scared. They were saying, oh, they're collecting this, they're doing this, they're doing this. But in as much as I don't agree with Huduma number, I think it's important to understand what the technology does. And I think it's the role of those of us who are in technology to kind of be able to explain this. And a good example I'm going to give here, and I hope the good pastor is still online, is the digital pastor they mentioned, right? It's quite crazy when, I mean, digital or AI Jesus. It's quite crazy when you sell that to people as AI Jesus. I mean, my mom would lose her mind if I mentioned that, right? So, but technically it's not an AI Jesus. It's whatever. It's an assistant that helps you with a particular thing, right? So if you frame it that way, then people will not have, you know, such negative connotation on what this is. And I would ask, if somebody who has a problem with AI Jesus, why are they okay with, for example, having Siri on your phone? What's the difference between, you know, AI Jesus and Siri, right? Or it's basically just changing how you're delivering certain information, right? Traditionally, you would have to open your Bible and read and whatever. But we didn't have a problem when we got digital Bibles, right? You can read the Bible in your phone. That's okay, right? I mean, I think for most people, it's okay. And if you have a digital audio of that, also, you can listen to the Bible in your earphones. And now we have another chatbot that you can ask questions about Jesus, or you can make a confession and whatever. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not giving a religious opinion here. I'm just trying to explain what's the technology behind this. So we need to be very careful in how we explain these technologies to people and all that. When I tell my mom I work in AI, she's always like, hey, see, these things will take over the world and kill us all. Because, you know, people have a very different understanding. And unfortunately, the way AI was shown to the world in the early days was through science fiction, and people saw robots taking over and doing all these kind of things. So we have to do better in terms of explaining different technologies to people, and making sure that our population understands this technology, right? And that's a mistake African governments have to avoid, because if we just go ahead and, you know, build the technology, a bunch of engineers design the technology, build the technology, and then we go and tell our moms to take over this technology, they're going to have a serious problem with it because they don't even understand it. So as we're building these technologies, let's also think about how we explain these technologies to, you know, the average person who doesn't necessarily understand engineering and all these kind of things. And that's very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Albert. I just have a follow-up question here from Epic Truth before Agnes comes in. But I know there is someone from the audience who has a question. So yes, this is to you, Dr. Albert. Can't AI be used to force persons to take vaccines they would otherwise not want to take? Wouldn't it be used to identify and track persons who make that choice and ultimately be weaponized by a state having such information?
No, I mean, there is no relationship between AI and vaccine. And by the way, so on the topics of vaccine, and now that we're here, I would go to the same part I was speaking about, educating our people on what this is, right? I feel like if a lot of people understood how vaccines worked or how they're made and whatever, they would be much, much more comfortable with it. The problem we have is, you know, Western companies make vaccines, they come and tell you this is the vaccine, and a lot of people are hesitant about it, right? And, you know, rightfully so. But what people don't also know is that a lot of Africans are involved in these vaccines, right? The COVID vaccine, a lot of clinical trials were performed by our own Kenyan scientists, right? So we have to explain that to and the problem is when the government comes with this vaccine, they don't tell that story. They just come and tell you, oh, a certain organization donated this 1,000 vaccine to us, so we have to use them. And people start thinking, oh, these vaccines, they're not good now because they're being donated by Western government, by Bill Gates, and he's going to put a chip in our body and all this kind of thing. But the truth is, a lot of African scientists are involved in the development of these vaccines. And if we kind of listen to them and give them an opportunity to explain to the people what these vaccines are and how they act and what they do, we wouldn't have such a huge. I'm pretty sure the moment. I'm pretty sure if my mom knows that I'm involved in the development of a certain vaccine, she would be more comfortable taking it than if she didn't know that I was involved in the development of that vaccine. And now there is no relationship between AI and the vaccines, right? I mean, it's a completely different technology. How can we use it to force people? Like, by the way, AI doesn't have motor capabilities like moving and performing. It's not a doctor. It's not. Yes, of course you can use a social angle to it, right? Manipulate minds and all these kind of things. But that's not necessarily what it is here. And that goes back to explain my point that we need to be careful about explaining to populations how different technologies work, how drugs are developed, how vaccines are developed, why they're important, and whatnot. Yeah.
Muluga, you can summarize your question in a minute.
Thank you. I would like to respond to the question regarding whether this is not a precursor to the mark of the beast in Revelation chapter 13. We all know that the word of God is supreme and sovereign, and the word of God is Jesus himself. He does not fail. And whatever he has said in his word comes to pass. So I truly believe that yes, this is a precursor to the mark of the beast, as it is written in the word of God in Revelation 13. Systems have been set, systems are being prepared for that time, and there are already clear signs and indicators that that's the direction we are heading to. And, like we have been talking about, digital IDs, AI, improving economics, improving health, gathering data and information, and so forth. So from Revelation 13 alone, we see that something is happening, something is being prepared towards direction. From what I have heard is that the intention is to get into our bodies. The link between digital IDs and the human DNA is something that we should ask critical questions about. I have heard, or I have read that the DNA of a human being has the God factor, that bit that gives us the conscience, the knowledge, the understanding that there is a God, that we come from somewhere sovereign. So once that technology or system gets into our body, its intention is to get a connection with our DNA so that that God factor is altered. Okay? That is why the Bible says that whoever receives the mark of the beast, either on the right hand or on the forehead, cannot be saved. And this cannot be saved. It is not because God doesn't love us. It's not because he wants us to perish, but it's because the human system, the human mind, the DNA has been altered. The God consciousness has been tampered with. people's conscience will get seared that they will not have the knowledge or the understanding of who God is. So there will be a disconnect. That is from the spiritual perspective. That's why we ought to, to be careful and not go too far with this technology. It's over to you.
So I'll now invite the panelists to just give us their key takeaways. Over to you, Bruno.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, it has been 2 hours of, but maybe before I do my takeaways, just to respond to something that was raised by Albert earlier on. I don't disagree that AI systems have advantages to humans or to society. However, I think what we are trying to interrogate here is what are the issues that we may face, or why should we have digital IDs incorporated with artificial intelligence? Let's look at the China's social credit system. And so what happens in China? Because you see, this is a system that is running with AI and digital IDs to score citizens, trustworthiness, and everything. And what has it caused in China? It has brought about mass surveillance, restricting of freedoms, fostering social control. I think someone mentioned, why do we need digital if there is AI and digital IDs in place, one should be forced to take vaccines? Which I'm sure if in China they said everyone should take a vaccine, I'm sure there is a way they can monitor that so and so has not taken a vaccine, and if that is a policy that has been passed by government, then you don't have any way of how to do something that is of your own choice. So in other words, they'll force you to take it because they can literally track you down and determine whether you took it or not, and then force you into taking it. I think that's where the person was coming from. But just to conclude, I acknowledge that while digitizing human identities, it could lead to quite a number of advancements in technology. And we're not saying that we are against advancement of technology, but what are those associated risks that demand us to have a serious consideration? How can we balance innovation with ethical responsibility? Because that is very crucial when we are coming up with these AI-powered technologies. Because the end goal is we should make sure we do not compromise individuals and also society well-being. And also the question would be, what is that trajectory that we want to take as, let's say, as a country or as a society in regards to AI development? Because I think there should be regulations in place. We should have ethical frameworks and also societal priorities. Why are we introducing AI in our societies? What is the end goal? What do we intend to achieve? Because also acknowledge that AI can literally transform industries, it can improve lives, but we also need to balance, to strike a balance between the development of AI and humanity's best interests. Because when we do that, then we kind of we bring in force or avoid unintended consequences. Because as we acknowledge that yes, technology is developed, but there are those underlying or unintended consequences that we may not have foreseen at the time of development, and may encounter them as we go along. Yeah. So we've had of how in real world examples whereby digital IDs and AI is being demonstrated. But the question would be, should we over-rely on digital dependency? Because we also acknowledge that digital dependency can bring about, all these systems can betray humanity. Because we acknowledge that someone sits behind the computer, programs, writes an algorithm, and has an intended goal on something they would want to achieve or gain by that specific system they're trying to. So how do we check that? How do we make sure that the AI systems we build do not betray humanity or cause harm, bias, exploitation? So the key takeaway here is that we need to emphasize the importance of balancing technological innovation with human rights, ethics, and inclusivity. Yeah, so I think those are my few takeaways. That's my opinion on AI. Yeah, I'm in the AI field, but you see, those are some of the things we need to answer. It's not that we are against AI and technology advancements, but we need to also figure out how we build these systems to benefit humanity and not to betray humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Dr. Albert can go ahead as Quincy prepares.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I like what Bruno has said, and I agree with him. And I think wrapping up for me is, one, we have a lot of work to do in terms of educating our people and getting them to understand a lot of these technologies before we bring them to the people. So preparing, the groundwork for that. We have a lot of work to do there, and we should take that work very seriously, right? We should make sure that people understand these things, right? Technologies like AI are going to transform a lot of things, how we live, work, educate, and all that kind of things, right? Many of you have probably heard about fake news. And if you thought fake news was something 4 years ago or 2 years ago, wait until you see what fake news is in 2024 or 2025, right? People are able to generate, anyone with an AI model can make a picture of me, a video of me speaking all sorts of nonsense. And if I send that to my grandmother in the village, she will probably not understand that this is not me, that this is a fake me. And the same thing is being used for, politicians, right? And whatnot. So we have to be very careful in that age, and we need to educate the people to kind of be able to tell the differences and also to understand the social impact of these systems that we're building. We need to do that. That said, I would love for a lot more people to get into AI and to AI research. Bruno is a good connection. He's sits in the board of Deep Learning Indaba, which is an organization that is strengthening machine learning and artificial intelligence in Africa, so that more people can start, not only understanding this technology, but actually building this technology, right? I would love for a lot more people from our continent and from our countries to be the ones building this technology, so that it's not a technology that is just brought to us. It's not a foreign thing, right? My mom would probably be more comfortable with AI if she knew that I'm the one who's building it. So we need to work a lot on that, encourage more people to start learning about AI, artificial intelligence, and all these sorts of things and what it means for us, and put more effort there. We need to fund the people who are doing this kind of work, like, a lot of researchers, engineers who are building these tools and whatnot, because at the end of the day, there is some serious benefits to be gained from this. They're not just economic ones, but, societal benefits as well. And that's important. And the other final thing I want to say is, let's embrace the technology, right? Anyone, workers who are not using AI right now are super left out, right? I use AI on my day-to-day work, like on a daily basis. There is not a single day that I don't interact with AI. And I can see how much it's doing to my productivity, right? It helps me improve how I work. I am more productive. I don't need to think about the nitty-gritty details about some things. I don't need to think about how to send this email. I'll just tell ChatGPT, hey, draft this email for me, and I will just go through it and see if it makes sense or not. And that's important, right? So people need to embrace these technologies for productivity, for their own day-to-day work and whatnot. That's pretty much it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Albert. Yes, Agnes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Someone was telling me that if there is artificial intelligence, then there is also natural intelligence and spiritual intelligence. So we also need to focus on those two to make humanity better. But anyway, my take home for today is that as much as technology is good for me, technology, digital IDs, AI should not control me, should not control the human being. Instead, I should be the one in control. Yeah, so giving away my authority, my rights, my privileges is not what I wish for or desire. So as we embrace technology, there is a limit to it. And to the Christian audience, I would like to say that there are so many things that look good or seem good, but we must be very spiritually discerning. We must discern where it's originating from, who is the author, what's the intention, what's the end result, how is it going to impact my life, especially my inner man, because that is who I really am. Yeah, so that's my take home. And finally, I just want to appreciate Claire, Lillian, the organizers, all the panelists, and all the listeners. May the Lord bless us.
Thank you, Agnes. Lillian?
Thank you, everyone. We want to appreciate Dr. Albert Kahira. Thank you so much. You've brought perspective to the benefits of AI. We appreciate Quincy. He has brought the law, policy, regulation side of this topic. Thank you to Bruno. You've enabled us understand what is AI and how far it can go. And of course, the future is open. We never expected that AI can do what it is doing right now. And we believe the future is still open, and it is possible that it can become super intelligent. And then Agnes for bringing out the faith and spirituality perspective. From us, from me, from Digital Agenda, this is what I have taken. This has really been quite an engaging and interesting discussion. I wish we could go on and on, but we need to end it. To our audience, it is now up to you and me to determine if digital IDs are for convenience or for control. Ask yourself, digital IDs, is it convenience or control? Because it might be convenience, and at the end of the day, you find yourself controlled and you cannot get out anymore. To our governments, over to you. We all agree technology is good, AI is good. It has made so many things easy. But must we add our biometrics to this mix? Can't you implement an ID without our biometrics? What do you want from my DNA? To the developing countries like East Africa here, is a digital ID that will enable us develop. And there are things we need to first take care of. Those that are benefiting from AI, have they benefited because they implemented a digital ID? I believe not. And from what Dr. Albert explained, a digital ID could be good if we were in, but who is behind it? Who is controlling it? Are we all reporting to one system sent to us from the international community, and we all follow without really considering things of autonomy and sovereignty of nations? If we are to implement it, do we have our own in-house people to design systems that are customized, specific for our needs as East Africa, as Africa, as sovereign nations? Or must we all report to some global entity and global tech giants for us to be able to do this? Do we even have the infrastructure yet? I ask, because every day we are using Google, we are using Microsoft and things of that sort. We've not heard of our own systems here. So if we are to implement these things, who is in charge? And then weighing in on the benefits versus risks. Let us first concentrate on the starting points. Are the roads okay? Can't we build factories of computers before we start thinking of adding in the digital ID in the mix? Are the hospitals okay? Digital literacy. Can your mother in the village be able to use a smartphone before you now make their ID digital? Digital inclusion. All the people already on board to be able to use digital IDs? And is the internet and network coverage fit for these things? And all those questions, we leave them to you, our audience, and to our governments. And then there is a new aspect that is really fast developing, which is human-machine interfaces, HMI, and neural links. These represent a pivotal shift towards transhumanism, where technology is increasingly trying to integrate with human biology to enhance or alter natural capabilities. So as these advancements are coming in, such as brain-computer interfaces, promising revolutionary applications in healthcare, communication and productivity, enabling direct interaction between the brain and machine, the question is still there. This integration raises profound ethical concerns, particularly regarding the erosion of free will. And I believe this is the perspective that Agnes was bringing in, because God has given us free will. So as neural interfaces potentially allow external systems to influence thoughts or actions, they risk compromising personal autonomy and creating vulnerabilities really to manipulation, surveillance, and coercion. This technology frontier really challenges fundamental notions of humanity and self-determination, necessitating robust governance frameworks to balance innovation with safeguarding individual rights. And this is a perspective Quincy was introducing and bringing in from the legal, policy, and regulation perspective. We call all believers, we as Digital Agenda, we call on new believers in God to go into this tech space, get into data science, get into artificial intelligence, so that technology serves God's agenda. Thank you to everyone. Hope to meet again for another engaging discussion. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, or good evening. Bye from us.